This was the third time I had seen my father since my mother's death. The first time, I was 9, and had already lived at my maternal grandfather's house for 2 years. He said to me, "The 7th princess has lost her mother just as you have. Would you go into the palace and keep her company?" The second time, I was 13. My stepmother was 4 months pregnant. He said to me, "Your mother's pregnancy is not going well. Go before Her Majesty the Empress and ask for a reliable female physician for her. Would you?" The third time was today, at Her Majesty the Empress's birthday feast. He said to me, "You are already 19, yet the Marquis of Xinling's household still delays discussing the wedding date. It is clear that Wei Zhe does not fancy you. A person should value knowing her own worth. Do not court humiliation and make yourself look bad. Let us dissolve the engagement with the Marquis of Xinling's household." Wei Zhe, who had set his heart on my younger half-sister, said, "I know that Lady Zhang's maternal family is the distinguished Xie clan, while Pearl's maternal grandfather is only a 7th-ranked county magistrate from a humble gate, so naturally they cannot be compared. But I, Wei Zhe, do not need the support of a wife's clan to add bricks and tiles to my rise." Later, when the Wei family was exiled 1,000 li away, Wei Zhe mocked me for marrying down to a mere guard. I smiled and said, "Lu Qing naturally cannot compare with young Lord Wei. It is only that I, Jiang Bunian, have no need of a husband's clan to add bricks and tiles to my rise." The 7th princess's birth mother was a low-ranking imperial concubine of palace maid origin. The concubine was out of favor, and for that reason the 7th princess found no favor in His Majesty's eyes. When the concubine died of illness, His Majesty at last felt a trace of pity for this daughter and ordered families to send daughters of comparable age into the palace to keep the princess company. Jiang Suizhu was the same age as the 7th princess, but to send the precious daughter of an earl's mansion away from her family to curry favor with a princess who had no prospects, Jiang Suizhu was unwilling, and neither my father nor my stepmother could bear it. So my father finally remembered me. After my mother died, I lived at my maternal grandfather's house for 2 years. Later, because the 7th princess liked me, I lived in the palace for another 10 years. Only, I had never spent a single day in the Earl of Loyal Diligence's mansion. It was kind of my father to remember me again and again. I thought it was probably because Wei Zhe had turned out so accomplished. The heir of the Marquis of Xinling, young as he was, had already won the emperor's heart. If he was not being tempered in the 6 ministries, he was going out of the capital on His Majesty's business. Anyone could see that Wei Zhe would soon carry the main beam. A promising young gentleman such as this had been betrothed to me since childhood. At all seasons and festivals, he treated the Earl of Loyal Diligence's household as in-laws, coming and going. Now, before Her Majesty's birthday banquet had begun, he intercepted me in the garden and said bluntly, "Lady Jiang, between you and me there has never been anything but a betrothal. There is no affection. I know that Lady Jiang's maternal family is the distinguished Xie clan, while Pearl's maternal grandfather is only a 7th-ranked county magistrate from a humble gate, so naturally they cannot be compared. But I, Wei Zhe, do not need the support of a wife's clan to add bricks and tiles to my rise. I could have relied on imperial favor and asked His Majesty to bestow Pearl upon me, but I thought that the young lady lost her mother early and is in a hard position, so I am willing to leave you a shred of dignity. Let Lady Jiang herself request to dissolve the engagement. After all, you are Pearl's elder sister. I do not wish to see the scene turn too ugly." It was not that Wei Zhe could not dissolve the engagement with me, but to dissolve the elder sister's marriage and then marry the younger sister would inevitably invite gossip upon the Marquis of Xinling's household and the Earl of Loyal Diligence's household. The Xie clan would not quietly let the matter pass. None of them wanted to be talked about, so they came to force me to charge ahead into battle. When the feast began and all were seated, I sat with the womenfolk of the Earl of Loyal Diligence's household. Then it was my stepmother's turn. She said to me, "You went to the Xie family at 7, entered the Deep Palace at 9, and for nearly 10 years since, you have not met Wei Zhe even once. Pearl is different. She and Wei Zhe truly grew up together as childhood sweethearts. Wei Zhe regards her as the apple of his eye. He does not even glance at other young ladies. To become husband and wife without affection, how bitter those days are. You can tell from your mother and your father. I cannot bear to watch you walk your mother's old path. Rest assured, your father and I will choose another marriage for you. The family standing will not be inferior to Wei Zhi's. My stepmother was pleased and cheerful, as though the matter had already been settled. But when she saw that I still had not nodded, her face sank a little, and she warned casually, "If you do not know what is good for you, in the end it will be you who look bad." Finally, Jiang Suizhu, she rather pitied me. "I know that sister's days have been unhappy, and that you do not wish to let go of Brother Asia easily. But Brother Asia has never thought of marrying you. If you keep dragging on, you will first become an old maid, and then it will be too late for regret. If sister withdraws voluntarily, you can still earn the fair name of aiding a good match and understanding what is right. If the Wei family speaks first, sister's reputation suffers, and with your age, finding a well-matched gentleman will be hard. We are own sisters. Do not make things ugly and let outsiders laugh." "Sister, is that not the right reasoning? My father said do not make yourself look bad. Wei Zhi said he did not want the scene to be too ugly. My stepmother said in the end I was the one who would look bad. Jiang Suizhu said do not make things ugly." They all spoke of ugliness. I was genuinely very curious. How ugly, exactly, could it be? I ate and drank, listened to music, watched the dancing. From start to finish, I stood unmoved. I did not, as they wished, stand before all eyes and ask Her Majesty the Empress to dissolve the engagement between Wei Zhi and me. Yes, if I wished to dissolve the engagement, there was no better time than today. The Empress would render the final judgment. All the titled ladies would bear witness with their own eyes. After that, no one could criticize my name over the dissolution. It seemed they were quite considerate on my behalf. Unfortunately, I was not very sensible. So a clumsy little palace maid accidentally spilled sweet soup on my clothes. At an occasion like this, was I to make a fuss? I could only let the palace attendants serve me to change my clothes. As I was crossing the cloud-stopping bridge, I slipped and fell into the lake. The palace attendants following me were unable to catch me and cried out for help. By the time the commotion reached the banquet, and Officer Chow, the female official beside Her Majesty the Empress, hurried over with my worried stepmother, Jiang Suizhu, and the Marchioness of Xinling, the guard had already fished me out of the water. I was still wrapped in that guard's clothes. The Marchioness of Xinling's expression was rather unpleasant. Officer Chow remained composed and calmly arranged for Jiang Suizhu to accompany me to change, while she led my stepmother and the Marchioness back to report. Jiang Suizhu did not hide anything from me. "Sister, do not think you can be lucky. This matter cannot be covered up. The Marchioness will tell the whole story in the main hall and ask Her Majesty the Empress for a ruling. On Her Majesty's happy day, sister accidentally falls into the water and brings about a heaven-sent marriage. The matter then passes over. Perhaps Her Majesty, having acted as matchmaker, will be so pleased that she even gives rewards. If sister refuses to let matters rest and spoils Her Majesty's mood, and then pursues it further, can sister expect any good? The Marquis of Xinling's household has long wanted to break the engagement. They will only seize on this. Sister has had skin-to-skin contact with that guard in the water. You have no choice but to marry him. He is Lu Qing, a cadet branch disciple of the Lu clan of Wu Commandery. Although his family circumstances are poor, he relies on the Lu clan. In the future, he will have the Earl of Loyal Diligence's household as his wife's family and the Marquis of Xinling as a brother-in-law. Your days will not be bad. I was not nearly as anxious as Jiang Suizhu assumed. I drank the ginger soup mouthful by mouthful, and warmth returned to my body. When you were born, I said coolly, Qi Muyu refused to enter the mansion as a concubine. My mother should never have softened and agreed to let your father put you down as her own daughter. A pity. In this world, it is always the shameless who live more comfortably. Jiang Suizhu's face changed slightly. What is the point of saying such things now? Sister, your mother was useless. Whom can you blame? Yes, my mother was utterly useless. At that time, Jiang Suizhu was passed off as a legitimate daughter, while Qi Muyu remained an unmarried maiden from the county magistrate's household. My father would take Jiang Suizhu to the Qi house every few days to enjoy family happiness. The three of them all had their wishes fulfilled. Only my mother, day after day, endured. In their eyes, I was probably as useless as my mother. Her Majesty the Empress dismissed the banquet early, but many people still remained in the main hall. The atmosphere was even rather harmonious. My father said I had no fortune. The Marquis of Xinling said it was the Wei family's loss. The two men, unable to become in-laws, beat their breasts and sighed with regret. My stepmother wept silently, and the Marchioness of Xinling comforted her softly, saying they would still be good sisters in the future. Then my father began to size up Lu Qing, who stood respectfully to one side. He praised him for having regular features and an upright bearing, saying his future was promising, and even calling him worthy nephew. Wei Zhe, the one who had planned all of this, stood quietly behind the Marquis of Xinling like a pine or cypress, wearing the look of one obeying parents' command and matchmaker's word. Her Majesty the Empress sat on the phoenix throne, chin resting on her hand, a faint, mock smile at the corner of her lips, as if about to fade. When she saw me, she lazily beckoned. Nian, come here. The intimacy in Her Majesty's voice was unnoticed by others, but Wei Zhe caught it. He swiftly turned his head and looked at me, his brow faintly knitting, a flicker of surprise beneath his eyes. I stood by Her Majesty's side. She said, I hear that Guard Lu has saved your life. How do you intend to thank him? I said lightly, Guard Lu's family is poor. I will give him some silver. First, Miss Jiang. The Marchioness of Xinling's shrill voice suddenly cut through the hall. Guard Lu is of low station and humble rank. You may dismiss him however you please, but the Marquis of Xinling's household is not to be fooled. The guards and palace maids near Cloud-Stopping Bridge all saw what happened. Your clothes were soaked through, and you were pressed tight against Guard Lu in the water. When you came ashore, you leaned limp in Guard Lu's arms. The Marchioness of Xinling knelt and wept. Your Majesty, although it was an accident, first Miss Jiang and Guard Lu truly had skin-to-skin contact before all eyes. The Marquis of Xinling's household is loyal to His Majesty body and soul, and my son Wei Zhe serves His Majesty with utmost devotion. Is he to marry a girl whose purity is now in question and become the capital's laughingstock? And then how can he serve His Majesty with an undivided heart? She was disturbing Her Majesty. I gently pressed Her Majesty's temples, which made Wei Zhe look at me again. I knew what he was thinking. He was wondering why Her Majesty had not yet spoken, why she had not even shown anger. He was wondering why I, supposedly the seventh princess's companion, should be attending upon Her Majesty. He was wondering whether his infallible scheme had somehow gone wrong. I smiled faintly at him, then looked down around at the gathered company and said, Is skin-to-skin contact such a great marvel? Even earlier, when Wei Zhe threw glance after glance at me, Jiang Suizhu had been frowning. Now at last she could not contain herself. Sister, how can a woman have skin-to-skin contact with a man other than her own husband? Is that so? I lifted my chin lightly. Lu Qing moved. He struck like lightning. Wei Zhe was not even able to shield Jiang Suizhu. Lu Qing, like a swimming dragon, touched Jiang Suizhu's face, then put his arm around the Marchioness of Xinling's waist. Shrieks rose one after another in the hall. Jiang Suizhu wept with shame and indignation. The Marchioness's hair stood on end with rage. As for my stepmother, she cried out and hid behind my father. And when she saw that Lu Qing had no intention of molesting her, she awkwardly pretended nothing had happened. Before entering the hall, Jiang Suizhu had said that Wei Zhe had arranged everything carefully, from maids to guards, with no oversight. I could not overturn the case. Who would have thought it? If it was skin-to-skin contact, then skin-to-skin contact it was. I had no intention of overturning anything. With the women of both families dishonored, my father and the Marquis of Xinling knelt together and begged Her Majesty to punish Lu Qing severely. But Sister Suizhu and the Marchioness have truly had skin-to-skin contact with Guard Lu, I said, smiling. We can only ask Sister Suizhu and the Marchioness to marry down to Guard Lu along with me. Although the Marchioness is older, she is not exactly an untouched maiden. As for Sister Suizhu, though she is beautiful, seniority must take precedence. By every reckoning, I alone am the first wife. The two of you must be the lesser wives. But the second and third positions can still be contested. The two of you can discuss it. The Marchioness of Xinling's face twisted with rage. Jiang Suishu trembled all over, nearly fainting. My father rebuked. Nonsense. The Marquis of Xinling said. Absurd. Yes. Everyone could see I was being deliberately difficult. Yet Her Majesty the Empress on the Phoenix throne gave a sudden pft and was amused. She threw me a helpless, doting glare. Compared with the aging Marquis of Xinling and the Earl of Loyal Diligence, Wei Zhe, who moved at the Emperor's side, evidently had sharper political senses. My audacity was backed by the Empress. Wei Zhe's face darkened slightly. He stepped forward and slowly knelt. Your Majesty, your subject is guilty. He said that although he was betrothed to me, he had been unable to control his feelings and had fallen in love with Jiang Suizhu. He had shifted his affections first, broken his promise later, and felt ashamed before me. He accepted punishment willingly. He only begged to be released from the engagement with me. In one stroke, he covered up the farce of skin-to-skin contact. Jiang Suizhu was moved to tears. Oh, Her Majesty raised her brows, unsurprised by his sudden frankness. Faithless and treacherous. Wei Zhe's face paled by one shade. Her Majesty turned her head and asked me, Anian, what punishment do you say? I sighed. The two families could simply have discussed dissolving the engagement, but the young lord insisted on treating himself like a prized pastry and playing the clever fortune teller, dragging it out for years. Wei Zhe's face turned another few shades uglier. If I do not have silver to support myself, I fear I shall be hard to marry off again. I stared at Wei Zhe with a half-smile. He was visibly relieved, and faint contempt rose in his eyes. So I wanted money. Anything that money could settle was nothing at all. He clasped his hands and said, Your subject is willing to add 30,000 taels to First Lady Jiang's dowry as thanks for her kindness. 30,000 taels was no small sum. The Marchioness of Xinling seemed to speak but closed her mouth under one look from Wei Zhe. My father and stepmother exchanged a glance, silently calculating that I was, after all, a daughter of the Jiang family, and in the future would be married out from the Earl's mansion. Whether those 30,000 taels would reach my hands was another matter. Jiang Suizhu, who knew nothing of worldly concerns, thought 30,000 taels well worth buying legitimacy. She was immersed in joy. All were pleased. I smiled too. In Wei Zhe's original plan, I would fall into the water, be rescued, and asked to dissolve the engagement, while he and Jiang Suizhu remained cleanly hidden from start to finish. Once time passed, and the two of them came together with untarnished names. Who would remember that he had once been betrothed to me? But now, Wei Zhe had to expose his relationship with Jiang Suizhu before everyone. Not only had he lost trust before Her Majesty, he also had to pay out a large sum of silver. Watching them were expressions of we bled a little, but at least the matter is settled. My smile grew wider. My dear ones, the storm had only just begun. Not enough, I said. 30,000 taels is not enough. The Marchioness, already aching with pain, cried out, First Miss Jiang, do not be too insatiable. She looked to Her Majesty for help, but Her Majesty only turned her nail guards with unhurried ease. Wei Zhe, instead, asked steadily, How much does First Lady Jiang want? 10 million taels. I repeated, I want 10 million taels. The sum was too large. The Marchioness wanted to accuse me of opening a lion's mouth, but even that felt inadequate. My father and stepmother looked at me as if I were mad. Only Wei Zhe, after a brief shock, quickly recalled that familiar, never-before-seen number. His support was His Majesty. So even in front of the Empress, he remained unhurried. First Lady Jiang is joking. Even if the Marquis of Xinling's mansion were sold, it would not fetch so much. Is that so? In front of him, I drew a ledger from behind the Phoenix throne. Step by step, I walked to him. In February of last year, the young lord was ordered to Jiangnan to investigate the case of private seizure of salt licenses, and executed 44 corrupt officials and evil clerks. Wei Zhe's brow twitched. I opened the ledger and read it out page by page. former prefect of Qizhou, Sun Lin Yuan, confiscated silver 280,000 taels. Former prefect of Songjiang, Fong Weiren, confiscated silver 210,000 taels. The young lord's confiscated funds amount in total to 19,600,000 taels. Yet only 9,600,000 were carried into the treasury. I snapped the ledger shut. Where did the remaining 10 million taels go? Young lord, they can only have entered the Marquis of Xinling's mansion. Under the statutes of Great Qi, a custodian who steals 200 taels of silver is sentenced to military exile. 400 taels is death by strangulation. My voice grew colder. For 10 million taels, confiscation of property and annihilation of the entire clan would not be excessive. The Marchioness's legs went weak. Had the Marquis not supported her, she would have fallen. Wei Zhi's face showed sudden understanding. He stepped forward and said, in a voice only the two of us could hear, "So I thought you truly wanted money. It turns out that after all this effort, you are still trying to force me to marry you." Jiang Bunian, feeling rather proud, are you not? You have seized such a hold over me, threatening the lives of the whole clan. Even if I were unwilling, I would still have to bring you in through the door. He smiled calmly, as though all this were nothing more than a petty trick. Do you think the seat of the Xinling heir's wife is already yours? Ha! Some people may scheme to the end, yet their wishes may not be fulfilled. Your Majesty. Wei Zhi once again lifted his robe and knelt, saying in a clear voice, your subject begs to see His Majesty. His Majesty knows your subject's loyalty. His Majesty indeed knew where Wei Zhi's loyalty lay, because that missing 10 million taels, through Wei Zhi's workings, had entered His Majesty's private treasury. I smiled as calmly as Wei Zhi and whispered, young lord, why not make a wager and see whether His Majesty will protect you after all? The Minister of Revenue and Censor Song, who had been drinking with His Majesty, were summoned over together. Wei Zhi was indeed a favorite before His Majesty. Seeing him kneeling, His Majesty immediately summoned him to his side and said jokingly, what? Have you displeased Her Majesty? I punish you to drink 3 cups yourself and apologize to Her Majesty. Yes. Wei Zhi straightened his back, and his gaze, carrying a faint taunt, swept lightly over my face. He was laughing at me for not knowing my place. Her Majesty did not mention Wei Zhi first. Instead, she said gently, Shaanxi is suffering drought. The people have fled until almost none remain, and the court cannot gather the disaster relief funds. In Hunan, the Yellow River has burst its banks, and tens of thousands of refugees have lost their homes. The Ministry of Works has long drawn up plans for dikes and houses, but they cannot get the silver allotted no matter how they beg, and the matter slides from one day to the next. The frontier soldiers' padded winter clothes have still not been made, and winter is already here. The Minister of Revenue had not even warmed his seat before he knelt and poured out his grievances. Your Majesty, truly there is no money. Soldiers' pay had to be issued, grain and fodder had to be gathered, consolation silver had to be sent. Money was needed everywhere. The Minister of Revenue wept poor, most aggrieved. Only then did Her Majesty spread open the ledger and speak of Wei Zhi's corruption. 10 million taels? The elderly Minister of Revenue was stunned, his beard bristling with rage. Beast! Beast! What is all my worrying and hair loss compared to that? He was a man of letters and did not know how to curse. Over and over, he could only say beast. Censor Song was different. He was a professional. First, he sent greetings to 18 generations of the Marquis of Xinling's ancestors. Then he said with righteous indignation, clothed in fine silks and fed on delicacies, sitting high in the court, they do not see soldiers shedding their blood and tossing their heads, do not see orphans and widows struggling through hard days, do not see common folk without clothes to cover their bodies or grain to fill their bellies, parasites who sit in office without doing their duty, degenerates worse than dogs and swine. When such beasts enter the court as officials, it is the calamity of Great Qi and the disaster of the people. Even 1,000 cuts are not punishment enough. Before Censor Song, spittle flying, the Minister of Revenue, burning with indignation, the Empress, who had pinched and scraped to raise silver and had refused to celebrate her own birthday lushly. And in my hand, the ledger with evidence beyond doubt, His Majesty's conscience trembled. Could he say that the 10 million taels had gone into his private treasury? He could not. That would be the deed of a benighted sovereign. Would Wei Zhi dare say that the 10 million taels had been offered to His Majesty? He would not dare. That would be betrayal and exposure. At that moment, Wei Zhi finally understood. The Empress and I had known all along that the 10 million taels were in His Majesty's hands. This was a trap set for him and for His Majesty. From beginning to end, I had never intended to marry him. When he was scheming over my marriage for the sake of love, I was scheming over the annihilation of the Marquis of Xinling's house. 10 million taels, annihilation was cheap for him. Her Majesty was merciful. She gave him a chance to redeem his crime with merit. If, within 3 days, you can make up the 10 million taels and deliver them to the treasury, your household may be spared the death penalty, and the sentence changed to exile in Lingnan. Lingnan, a miasmic land 1,000 li away. At least he went from worst to second worst. The Marchioness of Xinling rolled her eyes upward, and this time truly fainted. Her Majesty was soft-hearted. She sighed and said, "Very well. I have played the villain today, so I must at least smooth it over." She bestowed a marriage upon Wei Zhi and Jiang Suizhu. Whether the timing was fitting or not, at least the lovers were finally united. Wei Zhi knocked his head on the ground and thanked her for her grace. Jiang Suizhu was dumbstruck for a long moment, then knelt, prostrated herself, and stammered, "Your Majesty, your handmaiden has had skin-to-skin contact with Guard Lu, your handmaiden." Her face flushed dark red, and as if throwing all caution away, she said, "Your handmaiden will marry none but Guard Lu." Behind her, Wei Zhi looked as though he had heard the greatest joke on earth. His face filled with disbelief. Even Her Majesty, who had weathered many storms, was for a moment astonished. After an awkward silence, Wei Zhi finally laughed aloud, the sound growing louder and louder. The man who had remained unshaken before disaster had lost his composure before the emperor. When he heard that the Marquis of Xinling's entire household would be put to death, when he heard that the Wei family would be exiled to Lingnan, he had kept his face unmoved, because he had always known, in carrying the blame for His Majesty, exile was only temporary. So long as His Majesty remembered his loyalty, in the future he would surely return to court, and glory and power would be within easy reach. What he had never expected was that his former lover, who had sworn vows to the sea and the mountains, would be so eager to cut ties with him, and he had fallen into such a dilemma precisely because he had been scheming for their marriage. How could that not be called retribution? His Majesty had swallowed a bitter loss and was in no mood to look kindly on anyone. Jiang Suizhu had thrown herself onto the knife's edge. This woman is shameless, and her character is too base to be any man's wife. His Majesty's golden words carried no small disgust. Let her be given to Lord Wei as a foot-washing maid. Jiang Suizhu lay prostrate on the ground, trembling at the imperial wrath, not daring to make a sound. Having disposed of Jiang Suizhu, His Majesty turned his gaze to me. "I hear this girl fell into the water and was saved by a guard?" "Yes," Her Majesty said unhurriedly. "Your consort was just about to bestow a marriage upon Ain and Guard Lu." His Majesty gave a cold snort and asked me, "Are you willing to marry a mere guard?" I guessed his meaning. If I answered unwilling, he could conveniently order me to renew the old connection with Wei Zhi, which would let me taste my own bitter fruit. If I answered willing, then in his eyes, Wei Zhi and Lu Qing were as different as heaven and earth. Marrying down to a fallen cadet branch of a great clan would be an even better punishment for me. Either way, he would have vented his spleen. So I reddened my eyes and said, "Your subject's daughter is willing." His Majesty was satisfied. After he departed, the Thunder Guards escorted the members of the Marquis of Xinling's household back to their mansion, to be dealt with after 3 days. Wei Zhi passed by me and said mockingly, "I have not yet congratulated Lady Jiang and Guard Lu on forming a good marriage." I raised my eyes. He lowered his voice. "First Lady Jiang serves Her Majesty diligently, but in the end, she cannot even protect your marriage. The rightful eldest daughter of an earl's mansion, the granddaughter of the Xia clan of Qin Commandery, married to a destitute little guard, heh. A lady as clever as Jiang should know that Her Majesty is not without means. It is merely that Lady Jiang is not worth her quarreling with His Majesty. As expected of Wei Zhe. Even now, he did not forget to seize the chance to sow discord between me and Her Majesty. Ain Yen. Lu Qing walked over, silently taking his place at my side, his long sword slightly drawn from its sheath. Wei Zhe's gaze changed abruptly, and in that moment he perceived the connection between Lu Qing and me. I bared my teeth in a smile and said, word by word, Lu Qing naturally cannot compare with young Lord Wei. It is only that I, Jiang Bunian, do not need the support of a husband's clan to add bricks and tiles to my rise. At that instant, Wei Zhe's expression was truly a sight to behold. My stepmother begged me to help Jiang Suizhu. Pearl has been pampered since childhood and has never been without servants. How can she endure a trek of 1,000 li? I fear she will die on the road to Lingnan. Qi Muyu lowered her posture extremely, tears falling as she grieved. Xiao Yan, I know you do not like me. So long as you are willing to help Pearl, you may beat me or curse me. I will accept whatever you do. The two matrons who had come out of the palace with me to watch Jiang Suizhu pack exchanged a glance and tactfully withdrew from the courtyard. Enough. My father waved his hand impatiently. We are one family. What is there to dwell on in the past? He looked at me. Since you have a say before Her Majesty, pull your sister up. Do not be senseless. When your sister prospers, she will be support for you in the future. As if an imperial decree could be changed with a single plea. I laughed. Father, why do you not kneel and beg me? What? He was stunned. At 9, I obeyed him and entered the palace to be the 7th princess's companion. At 13, I begged for a female physician from the palace for my stepmother. Although the child was not saved in the end, I had still followed his words. So he came to think that I, his daughter, had a soft temper and was easy to handle, and in the palace's punishment of the Marquis of Xinling's house, I had merely been carrying out orders. I sat down in the high-backed master's chair and reminded my father, it is not hard. It is like the year you knelt before my mother and begged her to yield the way to you and Chimuyu. At the beginning of that year, my mother lay ill in bed. My father knelt by the bed, over and over, begging my mother's consent. He said Chimuyu was pregnant again, and the physician said it was a boy. This time he would not wrong Chimuyu again, and he did not want his eldest son's origin to be stigmatized. My mother and father had been married by decree of the late emperor. They could not divorce, and he could not repudiate her. My father could not think of a way, so he knocked his head and begged my mother to die, to vacate the seat of the principal wife. He begged every day. He knelt every day. My mother, suffocating with fury, vomited blood and died, finally fulfilling his wish. Less than a month after my mother's death, my father married Chi Muyu. Later, Jiang Changgen was born. My father, with son and daughter, a beautiful wife at his side, had a most perfect life. If not for me sitting here, reminding him of those once humble and shameless words. Unfilial child. He raised his hand. I lifted my head and neither dodged nor flinched. In the end, his slap did not fall. I had always known he was a cowardly, selfish man. Her Majesty treated me with fondness, and imperial matrons were standing guard outside the door. No matter how much reason and propriety favored him, he did not dare touch me. Father, today you refuse to beg me for your daughter. I wonder whether, in the future, you will beg me for your son. Those were the words I tossed carelessly before I left, leaving both my father and stepmother startled and uneasy. Jiang Changgen was 12 years old. Young as he was vicious and cruel. As a child, he amused himself by torturing cats and dogs to death. Now he amused himself by tormenting his maidservants. The day he was abducted by mountain bandits was exactly the day the members of the Marquis of Xinling's household left the capital. Yes, the 10 million taels, the Wei family did manage to scrape them together. Of course, with no small assistance from His Majesty, and it also confirmed Wei Zhe's name as an embezzler. The road to Lingnan was long, and I personally gave the constables detailed instructions. Not far away, Wei Zhe's gaze was sinister. Jiang Bunian, I will not let you go. Young Lord Wei dares to say such threats? I made a throat-cutting gesture. Are you not afraid I will have someone kill you on the way? You would not dare. He was utterly confident. You have already made His Majesty swallow a great loss. If you were to push the matter to extinction, His Majesty would not forgive you. When the time comes, the Empress will only throw you out to appease His Majesty's anger. Jiang Banian, within at most 5 years, His Majesty will recall me to the capital. When he settles the accounts of autumn, for the sake of our former acquaintance, I will beg for you a whole corpse. He turned with a loud laugh. Jiang Suizhu staggered along behind him. From the Earl of Loyal Diligence's household, only my stepmother had come to see them off. She did not stop her tears until their figures had vanished from sight. Then a little beggar handed her a letter. The letter said that Jiang Changing was in their hands. If she wanted him to live, she was to bring 100,000 taels of gold to ransom him. Attached to the letter was an ear, bearing a birthmark. My stepmother screamed, raised her head in terror, and met my half-smiling face. It was you. Before she could cry out, I made a shush sound. Madam, do not speak recklessly. Otherwise, what is sent next will not be merely a single ear. My stepmother and father had a violent quarrel, but my father still did not come to beg me. He was a military man. He requested an imperial decree and led troops to suppress the bandits. The elusive mountain bandits were fierce and cunning. My father gained no advantage. Not only did he fail to rescue Jiang Changing, he was himself severely wounded. I was actually quite busy. Her Majesty the Empress petitioned for merit on my behalf, enumerating the many accomplishments I had made over the years. At 15, I uncovered alien spies who had infiltrated the capital and recovered the city defense maps. At 17, I formulated a cure for a plague and saved countless lives. At 18, I presented a plan to gather grain and prevented a riot. And this time, I had secretly traveled to Jiangnan and obtained proof of wages embezzlement, recovering losses for the court. Matter by matter, Her Majesty said that I should be granted the rank of Earl. Had I been a man, a title would long ago have been bestowed for such merits. But since the founding of Great Qi, no female earl had ever existed, and the court was in a violent uproar over it. Those days, I followed Her Majesty to meet with many people, busy without a moment's rest. But I still found time to go to the Earl of Loyal Diligence's mansion to see my father. He lay in bed at the edge of death, too weak to speak. My stepmother stood at his side with a bowl of medicinal soup, weeping. The physician says the root has been harmed. Even if he recovers, he will have chronic ailments and will never be free of medicine for the rest of his life. And he will not live long. She chose her words carefully, begging me to save Jiang Changing. Almost kneeling, Madam, plead with the Earl. I said coolly, the day the Earl dies, that is the day I will have Jiang Changing brought back. My father suddenly turned his head, his clouded eyes fixed on me with a dead stare, and a hoarse, rasping sound came from his throat. I only continued speaking to my stepmother. Wei, which is more important, Madam? A sickly husband lying in bed, or a lively son who could inherit the title? The choice was easy. When Jiang Changing's third finger was sent back, the Earl of Loyal Diligence's mansion hung white. My father was dead at last. As for how he died, that was not important. On the night of the vigil, my stepmother asked in a hoarse voice, "Where is Chang'an? Madam, do you remember what you said when you begged my mother to write Jiang Suizhu into her own name?" My stepmother's pupils abruptly contracted. I reminded her, "You said, so long as my mother would give Jiang Suizhu the status of a legitimate daughter, you would not set foot half a step into the Earl's mansion. If you broke that oath, you would not die a good death." She trembled, red-eyed as if about to bleed. "You deceived me. You clearly said that once the Earl died, you would send Chang'ing back. When Madam has kept her own promise, then my words will count." Jiang Banian, I do not believe you. She ground her teeth. I said coldly, "It does not matter. Today, Madam dies as a martyr to her husband, earning a good name for chastity and fidelity. In the future, Jiang Changging's path to succeeding to the title will be smoother. Past today, Madam will be a murderer of her own husband and suffer death by slow slicing. By then, let alone succeeding to the title, it will be hard for Jiang Changging even to live properly. Either way, death is death. Madam may choose. My stepmother glared at me like a starving, dying wolf. Swear, Jiang Bunyan. Swear by your mother. I swear that I will bring Jiang Changging back tomorrow. Before my father's spirit tablet. I said word by word, if I break this oath, may my mother fall into the path of beasts and never be reborn for all eternity. She was satisfied, and laughed with abandon. Good, 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 good. In the funeral hall, Chi Muyu struck her head against the coffin and died. In the ancestral hall, I respectfully offered a stick of incense to my mother. When the first ray of dawn shone in, the bandits dumped Jiang Changging's corpse at the gate of the Earl of Loyal Diligence's mansion. I had brought Jiang Changging back. In one night, the Earl of Loyal Diligence's household lost 3 masters. The Earl, who died suppressing bandits. The Countess, who died in martyrdom to her husband. And their son, who died horribly at the bandits' hands. I put on mourning white and wept. Pitiful indeed. Her Majesty the Empress said, "Poor child. The Earl of Loyal Diligence's household is truly left with no one. Let Ainian inherit the Earl's title, to console the souls of the Earl and his wife above." The court argued again for a few days. This time, the voices against it were quieter. I became the first female Earl in Great Qi. When word reached Lingnan, Wei Zhe's father beat his breast and stamped his feet, pointing at Wei Zhe and cursing, "If you had not been bewitched into dissolving the engagement in the first place, how could our Wei clan have fallen to this? This woman possesses great destiny. Had she entered our Wei household, she could at least have safeguarded 3 generations of Wei prosperity." Wei Zhe said nothing. That evening, however, he drank himself thoroughly drunk, endlessly murmuring my name, and repeating over and over, "I mistook a fish's eye for a bright pearl." The secret report monitoring the Wei family was delivered to Her Majesty's hands. She laughed and said, "I have seen love turning into hate, but never hate turning into love. I dare say that if Wei Zhe ever turns the tables and returns to court, the first thing he will do is try to shut you away in his courtyard." I said firmly, "He will not return." In the 3rd year of Wei Zhe's exile in Lingnan, His Majesty passed away. In the 4th year, Her Majesty took charge of the court and ruled. In the 8th year, Her Majesty ascended the throne as Emperor, known to history as the Sage Origin Emperor. I entered the Deep Palace at 9 and became the 7th princess's companion. At 11, I came to Her Majesty's notice and, together with the 7th princess, moved into her Phoenix Singing Palace. At 13, I began secretly working for Her Majesty. Little by little, I became Her Majesty's right arm. Step by step, I helped her along the path to empire. When the first female Earl of Great Qi was born, it was already destined that the first female Emperor of Great Qi would not be far behind. On the day of national jubilation, Wei Zhe, far away in Lingnan, hanged himself from a great tree before his gate. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe and support my channel. Let me know in the comments what kind of stories you would like to see. Feel free to check out my other videos as well, they have some great stories too.